the plan. So, Mark, are you ready to crack on?
Yeah, let's do it, mate.
Cool. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Coaching Without Limits webinar, obviously focused on player-led development. It's very much going to be led by Mark, who is, as it says there, Coach Logic co-founder, Currie Chieftains head coach, although Mark and I were having a little discussion the other day about whether head coach is actually an appropriate title for him, but we'll come back to that later on. So just jumping straight into it, Mark, do you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about your squad and we can take it from there? Yeah,
sure. So I'll just jump into this first kind of slide here. Are you okay seeing like the information on the left, Andy, from our images? Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. So yeah, just before I jump into the full webinar, it's important to know my context because we're doing a lot of cool stuff. But I want everyone to understand we're an amateur team. I don't get paid for coaching, and we're in the Scottish Premiership. But don't let that fool you, because it's not Premiership by English Premiership standards. If we were going to drop into an English league, it would probably be a National 2, and we might be around about mid-table. And then our average age of the team is really young. So we've got 22 years old is our average age, and I think a lot of senior teams have that in their squads where they've got young age groups, because the demands as you get older now as a guy, when I'm coaching males, is more. There are more demands, so people drop off a bit more than they used to. And then really important to understand that although my average age is 22, a lot of these guys have been playing rugby since they were 7. But most of them by the age of 10. And on a 40 player squad that end up coming in and out of my squad throughout a year, there's about 480 years of combined rugby experience, which is really important to know when you're coaching these guys to take advantage of that. And then the makeup of my squad is also really important for me to know as well when I'm making decisions, because there's some aspiring pro rugby players in there. But there are students, tradesmen, farmers, teachers, sports scientists, bankers, coaches, you name it. There's guys signing off, a check for or a decision that will cost 100 million or something, or 100,000, not million. I want to meet that guy. But they've got responsibility in their lives, and I need to treat them that way when I'm coaching them.
Cool, good stuff. So you've spoken just, I think, because this slight question I'm going to ask before we move on is you're talking a lot about the experience in the room, which actually came up in another conversation I had recently, but actually, and it's pretty clear from that photo that a big part of the success you have is there's a lot of enthusiasm in that room as well.
Yeah, like we've all got a shared goal. We're all motivated by very similar things, even though we come from different backgrounds. We all want to be successful in our team, but success doesn't have to be honest, success is winning. I'm happy to say that, because we all put effort in to get the result at the end of it. But I don't think player development and winning is kind of mutually exclusive. I think they go hand in hand. And I think the players experience lots of winning moments across their training, their socialising, and then the game as well, obviously, because we're a reasonably successful team on the pitch as well. But I've got to harness that motivation, that shared motivation, for sure.
Good stuff. Okay, and then on that, you've also there's a few influences you've pointed out to me and other people as well, that you've learned a few things. But I guess my question to you is how a multilingual green owl relates to coaching.
Yeah, so if I jump into this one, so I gave Andy the slides beforehand so you could have some funny comments. He's come up with one. He called the owl a frog earlier, so I managed to correct him on that.
No evidence of that.
But yeah, the multilingual owl. So the guy called Louis Van Aan, I kind of get influences from everywhere. I guess the job at Coach Logic allows me to kind of get hands-on with tech and looking at a lot of tech influences as well, around about behavior changes, which is what I'm trying to do as a coach. I'm trying to positively influence behavior. So the Duolingo thing and the CAPTCHA both come from the same kind of guy, Louis Van Aan, and he's big on crowdsourcing, so wisdom of the crowd. The capture story is ticking a box to say you're not a robot. He made that actually people starting to identify where things were in a picture, or he was digitizing books by getting you to interpret the sentence from a book and putting it into text. So using wisdom of the crowd to digitize books and images. And then the Duolingo thing, which is more related to that idea of that shared experience and being motivated by the same goals, is that he created a language course which motivated by the same goals. He had people submitting the language courses for languages that they couldn't support as a company, which then spread into this kind of community of everyone helping each other to get better at languages, and a free app. So he's kind of harnessed that same motivation experience in the room. So it's really relevant to kind of the way I approach my team. And then moving on, the other influences. So BJ Fogg basically created the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford. And one of the kind of key findings that he came up with, which stuck with me, was this idea of B equals MAT. So B equals MAT. The M being motivation, the A being ability, and the T being trigger. So motivation is very variable within anyone, in my player group included. Any given day, any given time, any given person. Ability, you can kind of nail. So if you make something easy to do, then it requires a lower motivation. So therefore, that's probably where to go in terms of then triggering that behavior. And the trigger could be in the form of a text message or anything. You know, it could be a notification. And you'll see that a lot of guys from Twitter and Facebook came out of this Persuasive Technology Lab, and they used that, and that's why you get a ping on your phone at certain times of the day, because it follows another behavior, i.e. waking up or having a shower or whatever it is. So I've used a lot of that within my coaching. And then the final one is other coaches have influenced me tons, and that's because I kind of listen, and I'm part of communities outside my bubble. And one of the biggest communities that I'm part of is the Magic Academy, with Fletch and Rusty and the Stig. And they're doing some great work, and I pick up information from those guys all the time. So you'll probably see a lot of that influence within the rest of the talk when I'm going through my platform and what I'm doing.
That's cool. And one thing you didn't mention, though, actually, just going back to your squad, but you touched on it there with the sort of various social media platforms, is I guess the digital world that your players are living in. Could you expand on that a little bit as well in this next slide? Yeah, so we put together this ourselves actually as a company. I was introduced to it by Fletch, who's Magic Academy, in terms of Gen Z. I'd kind of heard about it. We'd kind of been starting to play with it in terms of Coach Logic, but I didn't really understand it enough from a coaching point of view. So once I kind of understood it, I wanted to share that as much as we could. So we created this infographic, and this is basically players that I'm coaching, players that you guys will be coaching as well. This is their Generation Z, born in the mid-90s, so 95 through to 2000. And then you've got a whole new group of people. Sorry, 2010, I think. And then you've got a whole group of new people after. I was right at 2000. And then, so, and I've got to be aware of these guys. And what's really happened over the last, and the reason I've called this opportunity, because what's happened over the last 3 months with lockdown is we've all entered this world because we had to, because we didn't have that ability to go to places, meet face to face. So we spent more time probably on social media things. We spent more time on webinars, searching for information on YouTube, etc. And we connected with our players in this way. And I found massive engagement through connecting in this way with my players. And instead of starting to deny them it once we go back to our normal coaching, I want to take as much of that as possible to help enhance what I'm doing as a coach. So yeah, that's what that's all about. What's your favourite one? Oh, mate, there's tons, but can I give you two? Is that all right? Or you got a favourite as well? You do one, I'll do one. Okay, so I like the one about the average, well, it is still two. I like the one about the average of 68 videos per day.
across all media platforms, which tells me already how much of it is small chunks, because they can't watch 68 hours. And then the other one that supports the fact that they watch a lot of video is 23 hours plus per week. So they watch tons of video, but in very small chunks, which again helps me as a coach.
Yeah, cool. I think the one that always jumps out to me is the 80% say YouTube has helped them become more knowledgeable, because obviously, especially in Coach Logic world, but if I just replace that YouTube with video, you know, if you're putting video in the hands of players or coaches, creates a massive learning opportunity. So if they actually have that opportunity to engage with it, rather than just consume it as such. So.
Totally.
Okay, so just moving on then, actually, nice segue. I believe you use Coach Logic at Currie Chieftains. Any other tools that you're using?
Yeah, I don't want to make this just about Coach Logic, but I do a lot through that, obviously. But I wanted to make sure you understood other things that I use to help support my use, to be honest. So the images are really important on feeds. And one of the big things about Coach Logic is that communication feed. So we started using Canva, which is at the top here, for producing quality images, and it's free online. And I use that all the time, and I've started to use it for my own platform rather than just being a Twitter thing that we use. Google Docs, aren't there. So Google Sheets, Google Slides as well. So coming up with shared what I'm saying, game plans, or your kind of backs moves, getting people to contribute to that within a shared environment. Google's really good at that, or even using their forms as well for questionnaires. WhatsApp. So even though I've got this communication platform within Coach Logic, I still need to nudge people. I still want to prep people. And WhatsApp's my quickest way of getting to the players still. We want to make it Coach Logic in the future for sure, but I still have some bits where I have to nudge people, and I'll still use WhatsApp for that purpose. That's a learning for us as a company, to be honest, to make that even more just all Coach Logic. Typeform is a great survey tool, so it makes surveys look cool. And again, if your survey doesn't look cool, then players won't take part in it. So it's got to look cool, and Typeform allows you to produce some really cool looking surveys. YouTube we mentioned in terms of video content, but we have to be able to reduce all the rubbish out there as well into manageable chunks that are really beneficial for players. So I go to YouTube a lot and encourage the players to search YouTube and find bits and pieces and recommend channels to follow, etc. Strava is just a running app, a cycling app as well. We've been using it a lot to kind of keep a record of what we've been doing over the last while. There's a whole heap of other apps out there. We've just been screenshotting and sharing the information from them. So it's not GPS, we can't afford that, but it definitely does. It does that for us, within an app during pre-season. And then Zoom, which we're using just now, because of the fact we haven't had contact time, I've done a lot more Zoom stuff with my players and actually got a lot out of those Zoom calls as well. So these are all things that contribute to me being a more effective coach off field for sure.
Cool. Okay. And yeah, it looks like you maybe as a coach be off field for a few more weeks. So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what you've called your informal pre-season? And I guess moving at the impact that's had, and then we can jump into the platform and have a look at it in action as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the point where we show examples of this quickly. But just to kind of show you the kind of setup of it, is we wanted to cover 4 areas. So, and also there's a lot of information coming out from the governing bodies just now. And in Scotland, actually, where I'm based, we've got more restrictions than, say, England at the moment. So you can't share a ball. There's only like 3 households maximum allowed to attend a session, which is a formal session with the coach. All this, and then even in the different levels, and I don't know when those levels are going to be released. So therefore, I just thought this is a great opportunity for my players to take responsibility for their own learning, to take responsibility for their own fitness, to adapt behaviours that's going to help them, throughout the season. Never mind just for pre-season. Why should it be me in a formal session at Currie? The stimulus for them to get fit and to be healthy. So we just blocked off the next 4 weeks and said it's going to be remote, and then we'll see where we're at after that. so that's kind of the decision. Across those 4 technical areas, the boys came up with the names. So instead of it being a fitness, it was Rocky, but we already had that theme from last year in terms of doing Rockies. Messi, because he's a technically proficient footballer, that was the theme for that. Klopp, well, we know Klopp is a tactician, done great things with Liverpool as well. Allows players freedom to play. That was a big part of getting Klopp in there. And the environment he's created as well at Liverpool, I think people would agree is really valuable. And then Buddha, which is my favourite, is all about mindfulness, your personal kind of qualities, sleeping, nutrition, all that stuff. And then weighting is important as well. So once we kind of created some points across the things we wanted the players to be doing, so these will change. It won't be hypertrophy or hypertrophy. You've got your level 2 SNC badge, Andy. What is it? Hypertrophy or?
Yeah, it's hypertrophy. It's maybe regional, maybe. I don't know.
So these are the things we want to do now. We've weighted them in terms of what we want to push them towards, but then they can choose what their menu looks like. And then within the points weighting, we've said actually you're going to do no more than 60. This came from LinkedIn. So when LinkedIn created the kind of ability to connect with others and gamified it by having the number of connections, they basically had all these people just trying to get as high a number as possible. So then they limited it to 500, which improved the quality of connections that those people had. And I want it to be about the guys not exhausting themselves. So it's 60 as a maximum. If they do more, it's not going to count towards their points. And then the maximum on the Messi is less because it's not as important at the moment. Klopp is even more like as lesser. And Buddha has no limits because therefore this is the kind of stuff we should be doing in their day-to-day life all the time. So that'll never have limits. And then a kind of few quotes to kind of help the guys focus on what it means, what it looks like. All right. So I'll jump into the platform, mate. You got anything else on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just remind folk, obviously, as Mark jumps into the platform there, to say, obviously, feel free to fire in any questions and I will direct them towards Mark.
Cool. This guy in the middle here, this is Carson. I used him as our pre-season pin-up last year because by his own accord, he hates pre-season, but he turns up to every session. So that's why I chose him last year for our pin-up for pre-season, and I've kept him this year because he ended up getting Player of the Year, which was class. And he's come through the whole youth section into the senior, so he's a great example for that connection back into our youth section as well. So, okay, let's move on. Oh, impact. Sorry, mate, I forgot this one. It's important to go through this though. Since doing this pre-season in its infancy, it's only 2 weeks old. We've actually got more than 50 active players doing it. So that would be a lot more than what we'd have at a physical on-site session. Per session, probably get 30. We'd be really happy. We've got 20 new players join the club. That's mental. And the reason that we did that's happened is because we've taken the link, which is a public link that you can generate on your Coach Logic platform. And I've said, right, if anyone's not doing pre-season anywhere else just now, we don't have to commit to the club, but because we don't have to turn up to training, they can be remote, they can jump on this. And we've had players come in through our other players sharing on WhatsApps and stuff like that, WhatsApp groups, and people coming into our club. And I can still keep our old content restricted by the grouping aspect of Coach Logic. And then the final one on this is represented by this graph, really. You'll see like the blue is staff that are creating content, and the orange is users, so players creating content. And this was in season. So this was like the typical in season stuff where we had mainly created by the staff, but pretty close at times. And I've always tried to get that ratio down. I want more users creating content than staff. And then this is lockdown period, not a lot going on. We had bits and pieces, but not a lot going on. And then this is in pre-season. We've turned it around, so now we've got most of the content being generated by the players. And then this is just into the second day of this week, and we're already here. So that'll be pretty cool. come the end of this week. And over the course of the last kind of couple of years, we've moved from a 75% of content being produced by the admins to only 40 and 60% being produced by the players. And that's something I want to keep an eye on as a coach. I want the players to be doing that as much as possible. All right, Andy, anything on that, or you want me to jump in?
No, I jump in. I've got a question as you're jumping in, though, just from Martin asking if the players are competing amongst themselves to maximise the points they score each week. I think you probably cover this when you get in, but
yeah, totally. I will cover it really soon. All right. Okay, so the setup, like I keep talking about setup, but like I don't just like say let's do this and then they all go and do it. I have to be active at the very start, and then I have to monitor it as they go. So this is responsibility. So for each area, and this is the messy area, I gave a couple of people or 3 people responsibility to make sure it ran well. And part of that was to create the content. So what does a kicking session look like, passing session look like? And then also ask them to kind of find information from YouTube. Told them that Rugby Bricks, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's an excellent resource for technical skills. So give that guy a follow. But yeah, pointing them in the right direction and then letting them get off on it. So they then came up with their own stuff, kicking from hand, tips, masterclass on passing, and then starting to create content that was going to help support their sessions that they were going to create. So after getting a bit of information and a bit of knowledge around about what these sessions look like, and speed, agility, quickness stuff, ladder stuff, if I just scroll right down to here, you'll see that they've then added in a scrum half passing session, session here, and then a kicking session here, as well as the SAQ stuff as well. So that then goes into the messy thread, and I can open that out to the rest of the players, and they can start providing evidence of achieving those sessions, completing those sessions. So the setup on that is really important. We had this informal pre-season prep week. So before we got into pre-season, we had a prep week, and we needed to tick off a bunch of stuff. So first of all, I wanted them to get into good practice. So there was like a high intensity interval training session there. There's a 6K run, fundamentals, where again, Carson, who's the poster boy here, he took that session, made sure guys were proficient at lifting, etc., in different parts of the week. And then things with the stars are stuff we needed them to complete before they would be allowed to take part in this pre-season. So medical form, a survey, and then a physio testing as well, so we could start to help guys personally in amongst the kind of the sessions we were putting out. So these are the kind of links to those things that they would go on to as well. All right, so that's kind of how we set it up last week. And then if I just move on to one of the sessions, I guess, again. So weights fundamentals was last week. There was a band program, so it's just using bands to create that resistance. Again, Carson leading it. And then this is what we do. We get the boys to, I should say this at the start, 70% of the usage of Coach Logic is from across all of our teams is on the phone, it's on the app. So this is just we call them Rockies, but it's a post-session sweaty selfie, which I stole from Sarah Kelleher, who's a hockey coach. There's a Magic Academy influence in there. So they just posted their sessions up, their session and their sweaty selfie. And then I knew that they completed it, and then I could allocate the points to them for that. And then moving just a bit further on, as we then get into this pre-season block. Okay, so this is blocks 1 to 3. And to answer Martin, was it, Andy? Yeah, answer Martin's question. Yeah, we've got an individual award that guys are working towards. However, I was really aware that once you get to a point where you're maybe 20 points adrift, 30 points adrift, what's your motivation? So there's a yellow jersey award, which is for the individuals. And we'll have a few of those. It's not going to be like one, but at the end of this block, we'll have a yellow jersey presentation. And all I've done is gone on, cheaptshirt.com or whatever, and grabbed the yellow t-shirt, stuck our logo on it, £7 per unit, and they send it to us. So I've got 30 of those ones ordered for across the season as well. We're going to have it as an award every game. And the reason it's yellow jersey is I want it to represent the effort that goes into performance. It's not just about talent, or although I always say effort is a talent. There's a Medal of Honor. So to make sure that they're not just motivated by this individual thing, we've got these teams that we've created, small groups of 5 to 6 people that compete for the Medal of Honor, and that's around the Navy SEALs award. It's the highest award you can get in the American military Navy SEALs thing. We've got tons of information on that, obviously, and then this is because this is a quote we use. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. That's the quote the players chose for our pre-season block. So that's linked to that. And then finally, bragging rights. So forwards versus backs. So I just want boys to like chirp each other and make sure we're active in it. So hopefully that answers the question for Martin. Okay, if I just go down, actually, that's all of our teams. So I put that out. Just sort of quick things on the teams. Points collected each week, totaled up for each team. Teams can maximum of 6 players, so their starting point's 4, and I want to encourage them to add more to their team by recruiting, so they can add more to their team. That's a good thing for us as a club. No dispensation for players and teams not contributing to points, and your training partner can be anyone, doesn't have to be someone in your team. And the teams are made up of senior players, guys that I think will motivate others. So there's been a lot of thought put into what the team's makeup was. Okay, and then one of the things we had to make sure we did, and again, this was a player who did this, was a booking form. So we just used Google Sheets. I gave the player, who's a teacher, so he's pretty responsible, should be. Well, I was a teacher once. And he's created this form, and the boys can fill that in to make sure we haven't got too many people at the club. And they also fill in a screening questionnaire as well that he's set up, so that the guys can use the club facilities. We've put all the weights equipment into a container so they can take it outside and do the weights outside. And again, the boys contribute to that. It's been class. They've been really good, especially my kind of senior leader group, which I'm going to call the coaching group. Through something from Warren Abraham said in one of his talks. That was really good.
You mentioned, Mark, just quickly as well about the fact that while you maybe come on to this actually, but during this pre-season phase is that the numbers are really limited for players to get together. So what your view on that was as a coach attending the sessions?
Yeah, well, this is why it's called Without Limits, because I was limited by what the Scottish Rugby Union had put in place, and rightly. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm definitely going to get into that. But there were limits there, and I just thought, how do you remove these barriers? Because the limit was that I could only impact 2 or 3 people at a session, because they all live in different households. So let's get real. So even when we got to a higher level, I could only have an impact on a few people. But this way, I'm impacting 50 plus people, just by allowing them to get on with it themselves. And also you're teaching them how to do it for the future. It's what's the whole kind of teach a man to fish or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I'm a firm believer of trying to teach them the really fundamental learning things, and then they'll go off and develop. And it gives everyone the same starting point as well. Does that answer that, Andy? Is that?
Yeah, and I think you'd also mentioned well about, just around those numbers, the fact that you don't want to take up this is sometimes basic, as you don't want to take up a space as well. Nah,
totally. And they all have different time requirements just now. We're not working in our normal world. We're not 9 to 5 in the office. It's so much more flexible. So the flexibility of the times where they can come to the club needs to be taken advantage of. And I would create like a real lack of flexibility if I was saying, right, we're all going to arrive at this time because that's when I'm available. So there's a whole heap of reasons. But yeah, you're right. So yeah, like I wanted to go through like what the thread. So I've set up all these threads on our platform, and the reason that this is the one at the top is because I've just searched Rocky, and you can search for keywords. The players will search Rocky, it'll bring up the Rocky thread, and then they'll get access to the hypertrophy session. They'll see the hit session, which I did today, completed, and then cardio stuff, etc. And you've got guys in producing their, and this guy's obviously doing it in his back garden. He's got that ability, doing the hit session at home with selfies. Got the Colts actually doing sessions as well. So some of the Colts have joined in, which is great. Taps off weather, obviously, in Edinburgh.
It's 12 degrees, mate.
Oh, here's another thing without limits. I'm in Germany right now. You should have said that. Ich bin in Deutschland. My Frau kommt aus Deutschland. So I've been saying that a lot recently. But yeah, I can't actually be physically there until 20th anyway. So there's that stuff. So that's how it looks. If I go into the next kind of example, which I thought was like really kind of, I like the Buddha one for me is I really like, because it's not something I've tried to influence in the past. Maybe it has been by little conversations, but I don't really know where the players are at. What do they understand about this side of stuff? And I've given it to Mike and Reese because Mike's pretty hot-headed on the pitch, and I don't really want him to lose that, but I want him to be able to control it better. He now knows if he watches this. And then Reese is a similar boat. Like, I want them to be better that side of stuff. So what better way to get them to take it on than to give them responsibility to actually lead it. So that's why they've been leaders on that in that area. And if I just scroll, one of the biggest insights for me has been the nutrition part of this. So what do they think is healthy food? So you've got some great examples in here of healthy food and guys actually smashing it in terms of your yoga, getting together. Like, there's a lot of good stuff in there. But there's also, so this is really good examples of what I would consider healthy. You know, there's lots of veg on there, some protein, porridge, etc. Can't beat porridge. And then there's other bits where I do think this person believes this is healthy, but for me, it's got a bit of processed meat. It's got too much mayo in there. Mayo, and there's cheese on the plate. Maybe it wasn't a joke. I think it was actually real. So that person needs to be helped in terms of understanding, and he won't be the only one. So therefore, I can then see what they're doing, and then at the bottom of that thread, I've just put some decent nutrition images coming through. Make sure everyone understands what good nutrition looks like. I want to make sure that everyone knows what that is. Do we know anyone that can help us with a 30-minute Zoom call to kind of teach us about nutrition? And I'll definitely be giving a nudge to some of the players that I think need to be on that call as well. So I'm finding out more information doing it this way than I would have been just like them rocking up and doing a session at the club.
I think, Mark, just as you, because I know you're going to go on to some of the video stuff shortly, but I think that's a massive part of just generally giving the players the opportunity to take responsibility for their own development and share what they're doing, and ultimately, therefore, what they know. That is a massive benefit for you as a coach, is you're now really educated on your players, like far better educated on who your players are and what they deem as good, and understanding where they are in terms of their development, whatever that may be. And it's not necessarily, it's not saying you've got all the answers, but you've got a real good understanding now of who you, like a better understanding, I should say, of who your players are.
Yeah, and I'm completely democratizing it. So if I was at a pitch session, you've got people who would influence that because they've been there the longest, or they have the loudest voice, or they think the fastest, not always the best. Whereas this allows time, you know, and boys to jump into their own pace and to reflect. And so I democratize the whole feedback loop as well. I think it's really important. Just, I forgot to mention, I'm just going to jump up for a sec. Oh, I'll leave it. Doesn't matter. I was going to say that some of the boys have been sharing a new mindfulness app that's come out. It's LeBron James's one, or he's part of it. It's called CAM, and they've been using that as well, which I think has been really cool. for just seeing boys sharing examples of, you know, good practice of it as well.
Just before as you move on to the next thing, Mark, there's a question just come in from Bev. Says your numbers show you have buy-in. Was this easily achieved?
Yeah, it is. No, because I've been trying to do this for. Yeah, it is. I don't want to say yes, but the part of me that's saying I don't want to just say yes is because it does take work. But I really enjoy the work. I enjoy the setup. It's all about the small discussions I've had in the couple of weeks leading up to this. It's the coaching conversations I've had. It's the speaking to the influencers within my squad. It's the creating the images that I thought would make them excited, like the image, you know, through Canva. There's a lot of work goes into it. But once I kind of set it all up and made sure there was lots of people influencing then the behavior that from that point on, and the point system was in place, like, yes, it's now relatively straightforward, and I can sit back and notice and support rather than being actively involved. It's very much like a session in that sense. Like, you know, you can set it all up, and you need to put a bit of effort into the setup of a session, and you need to prime boys on understanding what the session's about, why they're doing it, make sure the influencers are on board. But then when the session's going, you don't really want to be too much in the middle of it. You just want to be like stepping back as much as you can to notice and then to influence. And that's kind of what's happening in this world as well. So yeah, it's taken a bit of time, but now I'd say they've engaged pretty easily from that point.
It's a good investment of time though as well, isn't it? Because like you say, you enjoy doing it anyway. Yeah, you enjoy doing it anyway, but there's massive upside out the other side of it as well. And I don't know, Mark, if actually just this is the point where we mentioned right back at the start that you've got the title of head coach, but that's probably quite a traditional title, and maybe just touch a little bit on this is something you want to do in terms of the way you want the players to be part of the process, but it's actually also it's essential, you know, in terms of your role. So actually maybe the title maybe is more lead coach than head coach. And then, you know, if you think about the amount of time that you actually have, if you go back to normal, to be around all of the sessions.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't attend every session. So I've got a young family. I've got Coach Logic, which is, you know, takes up a lot of my time, rightfully so, Andy. And I've got to manage all of that around about also a passion for coaching. So one of the things that I agreed with my wife around about family time was that I'd only do one session per week. So of that Tuesday and Thursday, I'll do one, and then I'll do the Saturday, you know. And until this year, I was only doing the home games, you know. So I've tried to distance myself, or I've had to distance myself. So I can't be hands-on, and I have to create influencers. So it's been a forced to some extent, but it's been the best thing. And I know sessions can run by themselves. So I'm a lead coach, because I would say that the other two coaches around me, so three coaches around me, they attend more sessions than me because they can. And they're a bit older than me. Their kids have left home. They've got a bit more time, but they don't lead the sessions. The players do, but they're there and they're noticing as well. But my role definitely is to lead the program rather than to be that head coach, which is like, you know, fountain of all knowledge and everything goes through. It's just to influence and lead and direct, I would say. That's why we're talking about that.
Cool, good stuff. So I think you're going to move on to the video. Quick question from David was just asking about how you actually decided on the points weighting. Because
yeah,
away from that now, so
took a while. It was a lot of discussion. You know, it was discussion around about like the boys should be doing 3 sessions per week, probably, or hypertrophy, maybe, like if we want them to do that, 2. And then we're going, right, okay, if they did 3 per week, that would be 45 points. If we made it 15 points. And then it was just back and forward. It'll change next week. I've already figured out some stuff that I need to change. So nutrition point is worth 10 at the moment. I think it was a nutrition's worth 10, I think. Anyway, I've got to make it a lot lower because they're just doing it all the time. So yeah, it'll change all the time. But the starting point maybe took a few discussions.
Cool. Right, let's go then. Let's go.
I'm glad that was clear. Oh, I didn't do this one. Yeah, part of the kind of thing around about getting the players on board is I want them to do this strengths finder, and I got this from Phil Edwards, who's a US field hockey head of performance, and he got it from someone else, I think. So I got the players to fill all this in. I filled in bits and pieces, and I got them to add to it around about all of our areas that we're working on and what that looks like within each category. And then I'm going to get the players to kind of take their own copy, create a score 1 to 10, and then rank, what they're doing, so they kind of know what their strengths are, but what they can improve on as well. A quick one in there. And then I want to get to this inspire idea, which I thought was great. It's from Fletch on the Magic Academy, but having a physical document for them to look back on as well across the season. So part of the Klopp stuff I'm doing just now is around about getting players set up to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. So it does lead into video. So this is why we've been termed a video analysis platform, Andy. But this obviously proves there's a lot more to it than that. But jumping into video analysis, I get the players, and this is a BJ Fogg thing. So going back to that, easy to do, doesn't require much motivation. I've been putting matches up, and this is a match I've put up from I got from YouTube. Maybe shouldn't be discussing it too much, but we got it up on YouTube. It's for educational purposes, and the players are basically tasked with completing 5-minute segments each. So instead of asking a player to do a full match or to do all of the lineouts or to do all of a certain part, I'm just asking them to do 5 minutes of the timeline. So they'll just take 5 minutes of this timeline, chop it up into the key areas we're wanting to look at, or big rocks, just by pressing the red button, start, stop, create the clip, say it's an attack or a defense. And then by presenting that 5 minutes for the rest of the team, they can then search for areas of interest and bring up all the attacking moments and kind of get through those attacks. And then anything that they feel within the attacking moment that they want to discuss with the rest of the team, they can send that to the feed, and they'll get points for any clips that they send and have a discussion around on the feed. So that's the kind of analysis process, really, really quickly summarized. The reason that I want to break up these games is because I want them to start creating examples.
Sorry, can I ask a very quick question just before you move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, just going back to the sort of panel of what you're getting the players to look from, just to sort of emphasise the importance, again, going back to the BJ Fogg stuff of the less is more. Yeah,
okay, cool. So again, I want this to be simple and straightforward. Everyone knows what attack looks like. You've got the ball. Even our backs know what scrums looks like, even though I won't want them to influence what we do in them, because it's two packs coming together. So yeah, that's part of what it is. The other part is, as soon as you put too much information onto a clip, won, lost, dominant, passive, area of pitch, whatever, it takes away an opportunity for a player to make their own mind up around about that moment. So I kind of make it really simple. So then the discussion is enriched by the kind of lack of information on that. It's a scrum. Let's discuss it, or it might allow the player to ask a question which is relevant to that scrum without too much influence. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Cool, thank you.
Cool, so they can search for stuff. There's a whole heap of games that we've been analysing, prepping for this moment. And then if I go into playlists, so there's a few things. So let's get back to the kind of individual player element. Individual players, so I'm kind of getting those guys to do highlights. So if I just put highlights in here, Michael Vernell's got his highlights, so he's adding to that across last season. So I've tasked the players to go and create their own highlights from last season, and we've got to get our heads around the fact that I'll pause it, I'll take the volume down. So as coaches, I think we've got to get our heads past that highlights means they want to move away from the club. If they want to move away from the club and they're going to a higher level, then let's allow them to do that. If they want to move to another team in your own league, that's definitely a problem that you've got at the club. You need to figure out why and do an exit interview. It's not about them creating highlights packages. So the highlights package for me is the player's opportunity to reflect on the season. They'll definitely pick out their best bits, but they'll also get to see some of the stuff they need to be better at. So it's a really good reflection tool. So Mike's been adding to this across the season, different clips, and he can move them about and reorder it and all that kind of stuff. and then you can look at the different clips that are in there as well, and yeah, so that's kind of what Mike's been doing. Just going to pause that. And I've encouraged other players to do that as well. They can download that as well. I've not stopped them downloading it from the platform because it's their stuff.
You've spoken, Mark, before as well about how you're getting the players to always look for positive events on the pitch because you want them to want to be on video. I don't know if that's quite the right phrase, but
yeah, totally. So I just chucked in Mish because it's Hamish. His nickname's Mish. Anyway, this is an example from last year, which I want to get into this year's game. Is Hamish was a 17-year-old coming to senior rugby for the first time. Great kid, physically pretty well developed. He's doing more gym stuff now than he probably did before, but he's got a good base. However, his work through the contact area, both in the tackle and in when he's the ball player, it wasn't good enough. He didn't break through. So I was starting to clip little moments and send him the moments of when he wasn't achieving it, and then saying, "What could you have done better here?" Which is just, players can read that, what that actually means. And then it gets a bit. He then became a guy who was in good positions to carry, good positions to tackle, to someone who hid from the tackle and hid from the ball. So then I've taken away a really good part of his game because I've told him that it wasn't very good. So instead of that, I said, right, you've been avoiding the ball. So your task now is to create a highlights of all your best tackles, a highlights of all your best carries in the game where you're physically, pushing through. And then from that point on, he knew he had to do the work at training in order to then be able to complete that task on pitch, because he had to create highlights or I wasn't interested. Then all of our discussions became real positive because even in a highlight, there are still things you can work on, but you start from a much positive point, So when the players come up with their strength finders and then come down to the key things they want to work on, I want them to create a highlights of that as they go through the season. And then once they present the highlights to me and I go, right, you smashed it. Like there's nothing, there's very minimal things now. Let's move on. They can pick up someone else from that list and they can start to work on those highlights. So that just keeping that going. And then best practice was other thing. I want them to understand the game. So they're contributing to best practice playlists as well from that. I've got about 7 or 8 games up there from professional international rugby. And we've been doing Zoom calls on this one. So every second week, they can attend a Zoom call that I'll run. And they'll pretty much since the last one. Again, pause that. They'll talk through the clips that they've added to this playlist with, and that's why you'll see that there's Matthias and James. So they put their name in there, so they know that that's the clip I'm going to talk about during the Zoom call. So that's the kind of stuff I've been asking them to do within the video aspect. So that's it. That's it covered, Andy.
Cool, class. Yeah, no, it was good. I enjoyed it. Got a question here, and just as I'm asking Mark this question as well, if anyone else has got some questions that they want to fire in, please do. So a big question here, Mark. So get ready. This is from Clive Cashel. Having the right leaders in the team is key, but how do you encourage players outside of this, especially the quiet ones, to be involved so that everyone feels they're able to input? And then there's also like asking a bit of a question about what's the balance between sort of structure versus unstructured as well.
Yeah, so I get the leaders to influence those guys that need to kind of speak up. So it's not, the leaders have to understand how to coach. They need to understand the subtleties of changing behavior as much as I do. So I haven't got a leader in place because they know rugby the best, and they generally do know that anyway, but it's more to do with, I don't know, choosing the right people who can influence behavior. And so like a good example was that person who put up the post around about the nutrition. I didn't show you it, but I've then sent a private message to a couple of guys that I know are really good at nutrition already and asked them to give that person a nudge around about that area so that they can get better. And also I don't do any analysis sessions prior to the training sessions. So we don't like sit in a large group and look through video. And then you have like the 4 or 5 guys dominating conversations. I have it all happening on Coach Logic platform, and I'll purposely tell the leaders not to join the conversation. And then one of the stuff that I've done in training sessions, and this is again from Rusty and Fletch's influence on me and coaching, is I've told our key decision makers not to speak, because I want to hear what other guys have got to say. So there's all things like that I'm trying to do to bring up everyone else into it.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think hopefully that answered the question, Clive. The other thing you spoke about, you mentioned Warren Abrahams as well, and you spoke about rather than moving forward, you're going to call them leaders, you're going to call them co-coaches. So the types of qualities that you would see in a coach that you're going to see in those co-coaches who are still players, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and that's why I want to change that word as well. I think leaders, it means that everyone follows them. Probably better calling them influencers, but then I thought coaching group would be better, because actually they do a lot of on-field coaching, those guys, and they have responsibility for areas of our game, at training and also on the pitch. So yeah.
Nice, cool, thanks. So so there's no questions sitting at the moment, but if anyone's got sort of last little chance maybe to fire in some questions. I think we're all good. Well, yeah, so here we go, from Josh. So with so many co-coaches, how do you work through conflicts in that leadership group?
I just ignore them. No. Yeah, there are conflicts. Like the 2 ones in particular, guy called Ali Donaldson, guy called Bruce McNaughton. They were my coaches at one point. So I came through the club, and Ali particularly, he was my director of rugby when I was a coach and a teacher at George Watson's College. So that's a really strange dynamic where it's flipped in a way that I'm now the kind of lead and he's the assistant. But I have a real awareness of what I need to be better at. I can be really I can go for too high a thing that's just ridiculous, and it's just there needs to be a balance between trying to go completely player led, right, and the setup of it, and the influencing and making sure page, so I could be blank page quite a lot, and Ali helps influence the fact that we need to have a bit of control on that. There needs to be a bit more hand holding at times, and I will be the person that prompts him on the fact that he can be a bit over the top on control, and I need the players to have a bit more freedom. So we work off each other really well. If there are conflicts, then I've given the coaches the roles, so Ali, for example, is backs and attack. If there's a conflict around attack or anything to do with backs, I need to step back and allow him to make a decision. He'll have final say on that. Same for me with the forwards and defence. But then my job is to influence my co-coaches so they come up with the same ideas as me, I guess, over the long term. So yeah, there are conflicts, but we've all got responsibilities, so we can resolve them pretty quickly.
Good stuff. Yeah. So thanks. So I guess just there. What is very clear is as much freedom as the players have, even at this stage, there's still also a very clear framework for them to work within. Yeah,
like Klopp is a clear framework because there's an influence there, and the players have chosen him, but he's also pinned on my Twitter feed. Like he's I always speak about him. So it's just influence, but the good thing about influence rather than total control is you allow yourself to also be influenced by the players. So it's a two-way process. So control, you never listen to the players, and you just overpower them, and they nod their heads, and you never get any insight. Influence, you get insight, and then you figure out maybe how to influence them better if you don't totally agree, but you also probably get influenced yourself and maybe think about it again. So for me, I do influence players' behaviors. I'm not saying I have no control over what they're doing. It's just a lot more subtle and a lot more two-way.
Cool. No, that's good. That's good. Okay, so yeah, that was good. good question, Josh. Thanks for that to finish up on that there. So yeah, if anyone's got any other one final question, that's fine. But otherwise, yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Feel free, obviously, to get in touch with us. You can also jump on directly, just sort of, I guess, search Coach Logic, or there's Mark at coach-logic.com or Andy at coach-logic.com as well. Feel free to give us a shout. I had to remember my name there. So yeah, but now feel free, and we'll post this obviously in the clubhouse, so people can obviously watch it back, and we'll obviously make people aware of it in the social channels, so you won't be short of hearing from us, just to make sure that if you have any question, you can more than happy for you to follow up with them at a later stage.
Cool.
Oh, good, Mark.
We're on time, Andy. We're on time. That must be you. That's your influence.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. We were talking about trying to get it done in half an hour, but that was just...
You knew that wasn't going to happen. Yeah, okay, cool.
Shoot for the stars and you'll hit the moon, whatever. So. Good. Okay, right. Thanks very much, everyone. And yeah, take care of yourself and look forward to catching up.
Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye.